I guess it had been Sarah's idea to go camping after Pete died. And ultimately, it was Aggie's idea to go and camp by the river. Although, it was gorgeous and blue and clear, and we had nothing to do for the next few days anyways. And I suppose we should have paid attention when Sarah said she saw a man-sized shadow behind us on the trail, in something like an old-fashioned diving suit, and not told her that it was a trick of the light. And we should have listened when Micah said he saw a lighthouse on the horizon, and not told him that it was a mirage, because then maybe we would have avoided this altogether. We had deviated from the usual trail to camp by the river for the night, which in and of itself didn't seem to cause any problems. We weren't disturbed by any other hikers, and after passing a hip flask around, we all crawled into our respective tents, drunk and merry. Micah and Sarah bickered for a little while after climbing into theirs, but it was half-hearted, and before long, all we could hear was the sound of the woods around us. Until we talked about it much later, the four of us hadn't realized that we had all been kept up that night by a light occasionally sweeping over us through a thin fabric of our tent, and then gone, thinking that it was someone else using a torch to go to the bathroom. We hadn't realized in the same way that we hadn't had a discussion about who had extinguished the fire and poured dirt all over the embers. And when Micah brought it up, we rolled our eyes and Sarah said maybe he had done it, and it wouldn't be the first thing that slipped his mind. But Micah was distracted as we put away our tents, looking at a hill in the far distance, and covering his eyes with his hand. I asked what he was looking at, and for a while he was silent. And I asked him if he was seeing the lighthouse again, and he gave the tiniest flinch before shaking his head. Not this time. No, he was convinced he saw something else. Although what, he wasn't entirely sure, and he turned to us with wide eyes and said that we had to go and take a closer look. There was some pushback, but Aggie made the point that we had already deviated from the trail once. What harm would a second do? And if Micah was looking at the point that she thought he was, then she was pretty sure it would only take half a day. And if Aggie said that, who knew these woods like the back of her hands? Then she was probably right, and so we agreed. We would take half a day to climb to the top of the hill, through the forest, and then get back to the river by the evening, to spend another night by the water. We started off for the hill almost immediately, and it quickly disappeared from our view, only really visible through the valley we had been camping in. But as we made our way back into the thick woods, it was obscured. Not to worry though, Aggie had made careful notes of which direction it was, north by northwest, and had a rough idea of what land features we would meet before arriving, and we all felt in safe hands following her. The journey started to drag on, however, and when we decided to stop for a break, we found that all of our watches were out of sync. Mine said that we had been walking for 3 hours, and Micah's only said half an hour. We argued for a while about whose was more accurate, before deciding to just push on and see how far we got. We commented on how strange it was, sure, but everyone was so caught up in proving that their watch told the right time. An argument so pointless, it could only ever be had by old friends, that the weirdness was quickly forgotten. It was when Aggie stopped and started checking the map over and over that we began to feel like something was wrong. Our GPS signal was patchy, as was to be expected in the woods, but it had stopped altogether an hour ago, at least by my watch, Aggie had acted nonplussed and said that all we really needed was a map, and pushed on. But now she turned around and showed us where we should be, and the small stream that we should have crossed half an hour ago, and said that she had no idea where we were. She was sweating a little, and I wondered how long she had kept this to herself. She said our best bet was to find high ground and to not panic, and then from there, we should be able to find the trail or a landmark. Our watches were further out of sync now, and we had almost abandoned using them altogether. Something began to feel very, very wrong. It was more than just the feeling of being lost. It felt as we were somewhere we weren't meant to be, as if we had crossed some invisible boundary, and the world around us was new, alien. It all looked the same, but it was quiet, hushed, and I noticed that it was beginning to grow dark. Grow dark? We had only been hiking for a few hours, or at least, it only felt like a few hours. Our phones were broken, no signal whatsoever, and we quickly gave up trying. There was a sound that cut through the silence, and through our discussion about what to do next. It sounded like the cry of something huge. You could hear it in the depth of the sound, the organic rattle, the wetness of it, the way it cut out at the end like whatever it was taking another breath. We were silent for a while, and Aggie started walking uphill, and without arguing, we followed her. I tried to break the ice, admittedly knowing nothing about nature, and suggested that perhaps it was an elk or a stag. But Aggie shook her head and bit her lip, and when I told her to say why she was shaking her head, she looked at me and said very quietly that it definitely wasn't a stag, and then added, even quieter, that there were no elk where we were. It grew darker still. Sarah started complaining, but I could hear fear in her voice, that tiny tremble as she spoke. The cry again. Closer this time. Subconsciously, we began to speed up, and you could hear our breathing getting faster, shallower. Through the gaps in the trees, we could make out the moon. It was huge and the color of honey, swollen in the evening sky. That was when the first beam of light cut through the trees around us. We paused. What was that? And then it happened again, and again. And we began to speed up even more, moving towards the light, thinking that it was someone, a group of people maybe, and Aggie was shouting and waving her hands above her head. But there was no response, until we were red in the face and sweating. And then we came through a parting in the trees, and saw something truly unexplainable. There at the top of the slope that we had climbed, exposed to the elements on all sides, was a lighthouse. It was tall and white, with a 360-degree glass window at the top. Unmistakably a lighthouse. Because the light at the top was turning round slowly, casting a beam over the forest around us, now dark, for a moment illuminating the gray-green leaves. Aggie seemed invigorated. She said that if the light was on, someone had to be manning it, and she said she was going to climb to the top, and that they would know where we were. And Micah agreed, and they set off. Me and Sarah hung behind. It didn't seem to make any sense, and we agreed. Why here? What could it be attracting, or keeping away? The door was open, and Aggie and Micah let themselves in, and we heard the sound of their feet ascend the staircase. Sarah and I followed, a little more cautiously, listening as Aggie shouted up the stairs as she climbed them, saying that we were lost and a little scared, and that we needed help. Micah and Aggie hadn't taken a look at the ground floor, and if they had, I think they may have waited for us. It was disturbing to say the least. It's hard to describe, but the place felt sick, as if it was turning in on itself, eating away at itself, and as if it was wrong. There was scrawled writing on the walls, and most of it was illegible, but some we could barely make out. Whoever had written it had clearly started to lose their mind, and it talked about feeling trapped and chased. It said things like flies to shit, like flies to shit, and something like Venus flytrap, shit, stuck, hounded, chased, hounded, shit. They're listening and paying very close attention, and they're listening. It didn't make much sense, but just seeing something so mad, so insane was unnerving, and I wondered how long ago this person had left, if they did at all. Sarah was staring at something herself, surprisingly silent for Sarah. She turned to me with a pained expression and looked as if she was about to say something when Micah and Aggie clattered back down the stairs. "No one," was all that Aggie could say for a moment. "No one up there." One of the windows smashed. She was catching her breath. Small amount of dried blood. Someone was here a while ago. A few days, a week. Micah was nodding, and it looked like he had seen a ghost. "Something's turning the lighthouse on though, and... Micah cut her off. "It's not on the map. Maybe it's under a different symbol or..." "No, Sarah, look. None of this is on the map. There's no hill where we are, where we should be, and the landscape around doesn't fit anything. We had a better look when we were at the top." I felt sick. We all felt sick. And then Sarah looked behind her and spoke very slowly. "The lock on the second door." We all looked behind her and saw for the first time a second door, small and wooden, down a flight of 3 stairs, the type that might lead to a basement or a cellar. "There's no bolt on this side, but I used to have a lock just like this. You can see the brass on each side of the door. There's a bolt on the other side." I spoke up. "So what?" "Who has a basement where you can only lock yourself in?" We could hear the wind whistle through the broken window all the way up the stairs as we stood, facing each other. We agreed that night that we would all stay together, as the door began to give us the creeps, and we imagined whatever might come through it, or whatever was outside in the forest, and we made our way up the staircase, walking until our legs hurt, and we put our sleeping bags and camping mats around the huge light that was turning on its own accord. I think the others had an adrenaline dump, going from so much to none, and I was surprised when they seemed to fall asleep before me. I typed this out on my phone instead, thankful that I'd used the solar charger earlier. It was strange though. I couldn't get any GPS signal or any phone signal, and I wasn't really able to browse the web at all. All I could do was send messages to people that I discovered, after panicked trial and error, but the phone would lag or glitch, and I would type out full messages but only parts would send, like the keyboard was glitching. And it would finally read, "In woods, come, I need help," or something similar. I thought about waking the others up, but they were passed out and I wasn't even sure if these messages were sending. No one was reading them. I was just spamming friends with messages that made no sense. This was the longest that I could get out there, and I think it's because I typed it on my notes first. Something about the keyboard and the patchy internet glitching it, I'm sure. At least I hope so, because we need to leave soon. I can hear those cries in the night, and I've come to realize that there are more than one. Whatever they are, they're communicating. The wind in the trees sounds like the tide coming in, or a conversation, and for a while, I think I can hear people downstairs. Footsteps, hushed conversations, but whenever I strain my ear to listen, I hear it quiet. Shh. Perhaps that's the blood in my ear, the same way seashells make you hear the sea, or something. It's just me being paranoid. At least I hope so, because in between gusts of wind and the beats of my heart, I can hear the voices using our names.